Tom Pelissero and his usual Friday spot, NFL Network Insider. Good to see you, Tom. How are you, sir?
Good to see you, Rich. What's up to the fellas in the studios? Here's some new voices over there today. How's everybody doing?
Tom,
Jay
what's
Felly's
up,
here.
brother?
Jay Felly's here.
Felly's here.
So, if just for, again, because I pay attention to these things, when you had trouble zooming in a couple weeks ago, you chose a different spot in your house that had the golden Minnesota light on you. Are you back in that place? Is this your new place?
No, I think this is, I don't know how Zoom works, and so I hit a bunch of buttons, and eventually it looked like something out of an Austin Powers film. This is, I think, the genuine article. This is how we actually look like in here.
Okay. Just, by the way, I think this works. We see footballs. I see your beautiful family behind there. Look at that setup.
Absolutely.
It's very nice. Very nice. I feel like the room raider now.
We need a mug.
Nothing.
We need a show mug.
None of that stuff's mine. Other than the starting lineup guys. Everything else was was curated for me.
Who are the starting lineup guys? Who are they?
So those are my originals from childhood. Like, we're coming up on Christmas here. You get, I got Eric Dickerson. I vividly remember it in a stocking Christmas morning. Also got Warren Moon's up there.
Nice.
Phil Simms, Jim Everett, Darren Nelson, because you can tell I grew up in Minnesota, and the Boz. That's my favorite one.
Fantastic.
He's got, hold on. Let me grab it here.
Go for it. There you go. Tom Pelissero is going to go grab the Boz. I want to see this. Let me see.
So the best part, the starting lineup guys were the second generation. You could remove the helmet, and he's actually got the haircut.
Wow.
Look at that.
Yes.
Very nice.
That is some extreme detail right there.
Wow. It's great. It's kind of funny, Tom. I had to explain to my 12-year-old son watching the Fansville commercial that the sheriff is named Brian Bosworth, and his presence in these commercials is a neat little Easter egg for people my age. I had to tell him that, who the Boz is and everything like that.
There was nobody cooler when you were 9 years old, like the dude with the shaved stuff in the sides. He wore the Oakleys. He's giving out Ban the Boz shirts, and then he got run over by Bo Jackson. And then here we are.
Tom Pelissero, always with facts, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, so AFC South quarterbacks, who are we seeing this weekend? What do you got for me right now?
There's certainly a lot going on right now. Trevor Lawrence was on the practice field today, which is a good sign, because then if he can upgrade from a limited capacity to a full capacity on Saturday, there's at least a chance that he could end up playing on Sunday. Again, you got to make big decisions on this too, in terms of, do you want to put him out there even if he gets medically cleared? Most coaches would say once the independent neurologist signs off, you're going to have him on the field. But there's a lot of different things that go into this in terms of how your brain and your body react to making their way through the protocol. Same thing with CJ Stroud. He's going on 2 weeks of this here, so no expectation that we see him on the field, although D'Amico Ryans yesterday kind of laughed off a question about whether we see Stroud again this season. Does not sound like they're concerned about a long-term issue. And then you got Will Levis, who was on the practice field today. I think we've seen Mike Vrabel do this a number of times, having somebody at least out there to take a couple of reps in order to create the appearance that perhaps the player could go. But considering the fact that this was an injury that the broadcast crew would not even show a replay of during the day, the fact that it's a sprained ankle and he's practicing, at least in some capacity, 5 days later, would give you a decent degree of confidence that a player who, let's be honest, he quite possibly could be the quarterback of the future in Tennessee, that even if he doesn't play this week, should get back this season.
Do we see Tyreek Hill against the Cowboys? What do you think?
Everything sounds like it's trending in a positive direction right now for Tyreek Hill. He's been back on the practice field the past couple of days. There was a chance that he was going to go last week. He went through that pregame workout, just wasn't doing a lot side to side at that point. So certainly sounds like, barring a setback, you'll see Tyreek this week. Doesn't help fantasy owners like me who lost last week, plugging in Rashid Shaheed for Tyreek at the last second. But hey, for those people in the playoffs, Tyreek's, it seems like he's ready to help you out.
Okay, I see what you're saying right there. And Ja'Marr Chase, how long do you think he's out, Tom?
They're hoping that it's not a lot more beyond this game. They knew pretty early on, once he underwent the testing, that he was not going to be able to be out there this week. You're getting down to that point in the season too, Rich, where an injury that maybe if this were week 3, week 4, week 5, you're saying, okay, he's going to miss 2-3 games. Now that you're down to the end here, as long as somebody is medically cleared, in other words, the doctors say it's okay for you to play, you do have a little bit more license as the player to say, I want to be out there. For the team to be perhaps more open to, I don't want to say taking chances, because I don't think that you're taking chances medically, but if you're you get the sign off that you're able to be out there, it would not surprise me at all if you see Chase continue to push and he's back out there before the regular season. So
why are teams releasing players right now? Like I just saw Sebastian Joseph Day is now on the market. I mean, why? What's the point of it? It's not like cap ramifications, is it? I mean, how do these things work? Because I mean that's a guy who can show up on a playoff team tomorrow and make a difference. Tom,
no question. There's a couple of different reasons the teams release players after the trade deadline. One being if you are trying to get some money back, because if a player, let's say, has several $1 million still guaranteed for the rest of the season, another team, if they claim off waivers, they pick up the whole contract. If he clears waivers, then you sign him, you at least get out from under however many hundreds of thousands of dollars would be on the minimum salary. The other part of it, and I don't know which of these is the case with Sebastian Joseph Day as of now, but there's other times where it's a player's like, listen, we're eliminated from the playoffs. I'm probably not going to be around here next year either. I want to go and play for a different team. The Chargers are, going into their first game with a new head coach with Giff Smith taking over. Obviously, JoJo Wooden's been making moves as the interim GM. You're down toward the end of this thing. They're just trying to find ways to put it together. Certainly an interesting move because, along with Justin Houston, Jason Pierre-Paul, Zach Ertz, you got some name players that are out there right now, and they're all trying to figure out. One thing, too, Rich, you have to remember, even though you have offsets in your regular season money, the player does a deal for the playoffs. There are no offsets there. So for guys who are still making money right now, your real your opportunity to cash in is once you get to playoff time and you get your playoff shares in full.
NFL Network insider Tom Pelissero here on the Rich Eisen Show. What are you hearing from people as the most attractive job that will be open? And it can include already that something that is. What are you hearing right now?
This is a fascinating thing here, Rich, because you've obviously got 3 jobs open right now between the Chargers and the Raiders and Carolina that's been open. Each of those, I think, has both their positives and negatives. I think that a lot of people believe externally the Chargers job is the best one out there. But just in talking to people realistically about that team, where they are and the roster, there's going to be some hard decisions that the next regime is going to have to make. I mean, do you trade one of those wide receivers? Austin Eckler is probably leaving in free agency. You've got a lot of older, expensive players on defense. Even a guy like Joey Bosa, who's making a lot of money, hasn't played a lot in 2 years because of injuries. Do you potentially look to trade him? And those are all broader conversations that, in the past, the Chargers have not liked to do that in terms of moving on from some of their marquee, their star players, so to speak. But a new GM coming in is going to say, listen, if we're going to kind of remake this thing, this is the opportunity to potentially move on from some of those big salaries, clear cap space, clear cash moving forward, and rebuild this thing. You don't want to say entirely from the ground up because you got a quarterback in Justin Herbert. But in other words, this is not a plug and play. The next coach comes in, let's go win the Super Bowl right now. You could find somebody, if that's what you want to hear, to tell you that. But realistically, if you're looking at this roster right now, there's certainly a good case to be made that you need to start over a little bit. In Las Vegas with the Raiders, that's obviously a unique opportunity. I believe, and based on conversations, I think that job is better than what people externally tend to think. Mark Davis is a unique guy, but all he really wants to do is win. He wants to figure that out and get the right people in place. He's taken a couple of big swings with John Gruden and Josh McDaniels for completely different reasons. Neither of those worked out. You're going to have to figure out the quarterback position. You got Jimmy Garoppolo, who's still guaranteed money into 2024, so you have to do something there. Is Aiden O'Connell the guy? What do you do with Devontae Adams? Again, you can make the case that right now, if you can still get substantial capital, maybe a first-round pick for Devontae Adams, where you are programmatically, maybe you should move on. Carolina, you got to be buying in on Bryce Young, and you got to be buying in on David Tepper. And I think that's another one that's a better job than people externally might think if you're a believer in the starting quarterback. There's obviously other jobs that potentially could open here. Washington is one that's been in focus. I would say this, Rich, one of the really interesting things is that after 20 plus years of everybody making jokes about why would anyone go to Washington, you're going to get fired, you got to deal with the owner, all of a sudden people are really intrigued by Washington. They've got a lot of draft capital because they traded away those pass rushers before the deadline. They've got enough flexibility financially. You got a guy in Sam Howell, a quarterback who maybe you can build with him, but you're also not over leveraged into that position. He was a 5th-round pick a couple of years ago. You're not spending any money at the position, so you could draft one and keep Howell for the short term. And you've got Josh Harris there who is going to try to build this thing the right way. So in the end, Rich, we'll see what jobs end up opening up, but I would not be surprised at all if Washington is one of, if not the most attractive jobs in the cycle.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to use this real estate with you, Tom, to help me prepare for Sunday night's broadcast on our network with the Patriots taking on the Broncos. And what should I know about Belichick and Kraft and the way this is playing out over the final 3 weeks of this regular season, Tom?
Here's what I would fairly tell you, Rich, about where things stand in New England. There is no firm decision. There is no firm plan. There is a lot of different things that could play out here in the coming weeks, and this may well extend deep into January, if not February, before it gets sorted out. So let's go through, the various things that could take place here. Obviously, Bill Belichick could get fired. I'm not anticipating that that's how this is going to be framed at minimum, and I don't envision that's how it's going to play out. You could work out a trade for Bill Belichick. Obviously, last year, you've got the precedent of Sean Payton, the way that Mickey Loomis handled that, which was, here's the price. If you're willing to pay this in terms of draft picks, go talk to whoever you want. Go find that. Go find the contract. Come back to me. This is the price. This is what we're moving you for. Bill Belichick is, he's in his 70s. He's quite possibly the greatest coach who's ever lived. But in terms of it being a long-term type of a build, it's probably not a fit. So where does Bill Belichick potentially fit in terms of head coaching vacancies? I do think that there's something to be said. I don't know that this is going to be what takes place by any stretch, but there's something to be said for a team like the Chargers that has a quarterback, that has a veteran team, that maybe is not quite as far away as if, say, you went to, pick another team here. He's not going to the Raiders, but let's say the Raiders, where realistically there's probably a lot more surgery that needs to take place and it's a longer term build. So a trade is possible, but what are people willing to give up? On what timeline would you do that? And there is certainly also a possibility, and I would fairly tell you, Rich, this is a possibility that you could retain Bill Belichick in New England for 2024, potentially with some changes organizationally, changes with the coaching staff. They're not going to come back with the exact same staff, the exact same structure, everything the same, and run it back in 2024. I think that that's fair to say that there's, a lot of frustration there for everybody involved. You look back in recent years here, and it seemed like you've had at various times different plans for what New England wants to do. It was, okay, Josh McDaniels almost took the Indy job in 2018. We bring him back. Okay, this guy's going to be the quarterback of the future, or the coach of the future. Well, no, a couple years later, he ends up moving on. Bill Belichick's still there. He goes to Vegas. Now it's been looked at in a lot of corners as Gerard Mayo is the next head coach of the Patriots, and quite possibly he will. Mayo, at this point, well respected in terms of the guy he is. He obviously had a really good playing career there, has not coached that long. Bill Belichick runs every aspect of that football operation. So are you going to take 35-year-old Gerard Mayo and drop him in and say, you're running the entire thing? Is he ready for the magnitude of that? Is he ready to be a head coach? Those are all questions that they need to ask here. And if the answers are, we don't have the successor in the building right now for 2024, then potentially your best option is try to adjust some things, make roster changes, coaching staff changes, maybe front office changes, and keep Bill Belichick in place. It's not now, again, Bill Belichick has a lot of control over everything, again, including personnel. There are certain things he may not be comfortable with. And there's on a certain level, when you've got Robert Kraft putting out a statement about Gerard Mayo coming back, when you have fingerprints on like the Bill O'Brien offensive coordinator move that appears to be a Robert Kraft driven move, how does Belichick feel about his ability at this point to thrive and run the program the way that he wants to in New England? All of which is to say, Rich, you've already had various reports about this has been decided, this is done, he's gone. I would tell you this, and there's a lot of moving parts here. I do not believe, based on every bit of information I have, that there is a final decision. I do not believe that there is a singular plan that they're driving toward. These are conversations that Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft have not yet had, and that Robert Kraft, Jonathan Kraft, and others are trying to figure out what the best way is to navigate these waters going forward.
Yeah, and I think you said the most important thing is, what does Bill think? You know what I mean? Like his thoughts on what he wants out of this, I think will play a large role in it, regardless maybe of how the last 3 games go. Certainly if they wind up maybe with the first overall pick. I mean, like, that is entirely out there as a wrinkle, if you will. And then, there's the Steelers also. I just saw them, and Tomlin to me looked as engaged and as into the gig as ever. And TJ Watt was telling me this guy doesn't change and I will run through a wall for him. And then you see the results are very un-Tomlin-like, with George Pickens basically saying, I don't want to turn into Tank Dell. And he's going to go back out there again because these are the best players the Steelers have. And the sense I get from Steelers fans is many of them want to try something else. What do you think is happening there before I let you go?
I would argue the George Pickens thing is the most Mike Tomlin type thing that's occurred, simply because in terms of wide receivers with various levels of attitude issues for a team that's had Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant and Chase Claypool, this is kind of what Mike Tomlin does, which is, and it's organizational philosophy, wide receiver. Those guys a lot of times are different cats. So you take the guy who other teams might be downgrading because of various character quirks that they have or different issues, and you say, this guy's really talented. We can plug him in. We can get the most out of him. And at the point that goes to a different direction and we no longer can get the most out of him, then we move on and we trade Claypool for a 2. We trade Martavis Bryant for a 1 to say John Gruden gave up a 3 for him once upon a time. There's different ways you can, and obviously Antonio Brown was also traded out there to the Raiders at one point. So in terms of Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, I know that there's speculation when they're going through a rough patch, and it feels like we have one of these, Rich, every year where the Steelers go through a rough patch, and is what's going to happen with Mike Tomlin? Is he going to move on? What I would tell you that I know is Tomlin's got 1 year left on his contract. Historically, the Steelers have redone coach contracts with 2 years to go, so that was a little bit unusual that they did not extend him. However, from everything I have been told, that's not an indication that they don't view Mike Tomlin as a long-term part of the plan. I believe, and again, we're sitting here December 22nd. There's plenty of time for different things to play out, but I believe the only way Mike Tomlin would not return as the head coach of the Steelers would be if Mike Tomlin decides there's someplace else that he wants to go, and he initiates that conversation with Art Rooney. If that were to take place, if Mike Tomlin were to, one way or another, become available here, I do believe that there would be a trade market. I do believe that there potentially would even be some teams that have current head coaches in place that would be willing to move on from their head coaches to bring Mike Tomlin in. But again, we're so far away from that. It would be unlike the Steelers to trade a head coach or to move on. They obviously, I think it's well documented, Rich, that they rarely move on from their head coaches. And you have to ask yourself, from Tomlin's perspective, he's well paid at this point in Pittsburgh. He has a tremendous amount of authority over every aspect of the football operation there. Is there someplace else that he feels like he could go and have as good or better of a situation? Or on some level, there's not a lot of coaches who last 17 years in one building. Does everybody at some point say it's just time to move on? Again, I believe that's a conversation Mike Tomlin would need to initiate. And at this point, there's no signs inward or outward that conversation has or will take place.
Tom, thanks for the time. Have a great Christmas holiday and a happy new year, and send my best to your family. And that also includes Brian Bosworth in that little toy that you have there. Thanks, Tom. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich.
There you go. That's Tom Pelissero.
Hey, Tom. Hey, Tom.
Love our chats with him.
It.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.